Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Well, hello, and welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and this particular episode I've entitled, Trust Yourself. I'm going to talk about a number of things, one of which is when I talk about relationships and trusting yourself, obviously some of it's instinctual, and by that, we live our life, we have things that happen, and from there, it begins to set the stage for how we're going to approach things in the future. Obviously, it's one of those where you should learn from your experience, and I believe in applying that. Now, you can't live everything in life, but you can learn from other people as well, and I hope to be able to share some insight as to other things, if something you haven't considered, or if it's something that you've lived through and experienced, maybe I get a little bit of validation there, or an opportunity to give you something of a different type of insight from an experience that you've had. But one of the things that I also like to encourage people to do is it's not just about trusting your own instincts, but it's also about learning from your experience. And that's very, very important in life, because you can get stuck with whatever process you have from an experience. And it may teach you that, okay, don't ever do that again. Certainly there are things that never do again. You don't jump off a cliff and expect that you're going to survive that and do that over and over. Next time you jump, use a parachute. That's, so learn from your experience, and then you can learn from that the experience of others. But when it comes to fear, which is what holds us back in general, it keeps us from learning about ourselves, learning about our own possibility. And in the experience of relationships, that's being in a relationship will teach you so much more about yourself than in isolation. We obviously could try to live in a bubble, and there are a lot of things that you can do in, of, and for yourself. But beyond that, you have to be in interaction with people. And in so many different ways, when we carry that bubble mentality and apply that to the outside world, then we wind up putting ourselves in isolation, right? Just by default, because people can't approach us. We can't see them for who they happen to be. And unfortunately, if you're the person in the bubble, you're going to be perceived as someone who is either unapproachable or just can't work with. And I hope to help you, if you're one of those individuals, break through that and see that what's probably keeping you in that bubble is fear. And we all have it. We all have things that happen to us that teach us that we've made mistakes. And if we continue that mistake, then we continue to experience some pain or some loss surrounding that. That's a natural reaction. It's a self-protect mechanism that kicks in. But if we never learn to improve on whatever it is we're doing, you can continue to have those kinds of experiences. And that's not a life lived. That's not fun. Living in fear. There's reasons that fear can be healthy when it helps you preserve your life, because there's obviously risky behavior that is not smart. But I'm talking about both sides of it there, but I want to go the direction of trusting yourself and then giving yourself a little leeway to experiment, to go beyond your fence and kind of move that bar a little higher, so that you can continue to have wonderful experiences in your life, relationship-wise or anything else. There's something about expanding your boundary that opens the possibility to other wonderful things happening to you. And when the opportunity presents itself that you're able to share your experience in life and the positive things that have happened, that obviously, in my view, is a wonderful feeling. It's people giving you an opportunity to be center stage and to share what it is that you've learned in your years. And what greater thing than to be able to pass on the knowledge that you have, being a storyteller, whether it's a writer or writing a speech or just sharing it with your kids, your family, siblings, something like that. So I'm big on that, but back to the object of trusting yourself, and bringing it back to what I talk about in terms of relationships. I've had the experience of having to question my own wisdom because I have made many mistakes in life, either in assessing a situation, say, with somebody, and I was very trusting, and it turns out that I shouldn't have trusted them. Well, there was the gut reaction that taught me, therefore, I will never let that experience happen again. Now, that goes back to that thing that I was saying about living in a bubble. You can draw a line sometimes, and there's a line of wisdom that comes with that. There's an experience that comes with that. And I like to think that oftentimes that experience can really be specific to that one individual that you had something happen with. But you don't want to carry that too far, because the next person you might meet or next person you can meet may not have something to necessarily fear. It only looks like that. So then you have to learn to identify that. And one of the things to also do is to learn to be in dialogue. Talk to people. It should teach you to ask better questions. And this goes to something that I've said many times when it comes to dating. Asking good questions, smart, intelligent questions at the beginning, having an idea of who you are, what your value system is, and then asking questions and waiting for the response is very instrumental in you yourself having a quality experience. Because listening to people and their feelings, whether it's the opportunity that they speak and they can talk about something in depth, or if they give you something that seems like a very shallow answer to a very important question to you. I think that's important for you to know. It teaches you something about that individual. Going forward from that, also learn that some people are, they're not as verbose, as your host is right here, and they may not necessarily have a good command of the language or words that could express themselves, but they definitely have an emotion around that. I mean, there's so many variables in that, and I encourage you to look again beneath the surface. So it's not only just the words they say, but how people express themselves, and to develop a relationship, a connection, a dialogue. I enjoy that when I'm having a conversation with people. I don't feel that I ever want to talk beneath someone's because I don't ever want to be condescending or talking over someone's head. You get a sense of that when you're trying to connect with someone. Look them in the eye and pay attention. Give your undivided attention to that. I think there's so much to be gained from that. And then by the shared experience, them asking intelligent questions, or I say intelligent, but I mean thoughtful questions about yourself. To know that they're engaged in the conversation with you. I think that's important. I think one of our big fears in life is being deceived. Having invested your time, your money, your love, whatever it is that you've invested, whatever it is that is important to you, and then being deceived. So that is where the trust thing comes in, being able to suspend the mistrust long enough to get a response. And when you see things starting to go a direction that may not be to your liking, use command of your words, dialogue, put the brakes on it, and check in. See, that's a very important part of relationship trust building, is having the opportunity to check in. I believe doing it, this side of paranoia, because overemphasizing the checking in part obviously shows that you have trust issues, and then that might be something that's really important to work out on your own before you move forward into a relationship. And that's something to consider. If you have a lot of trust issues, then work on that. Get underneath what's behind that and work on those kinds of things before you bring that baggage. And I would consider baggage at that point, bringing baggage to the next relationship in question. Well, look, I'm going to take a short break at the moment, and I'm going to come back and expand on this a little bit more. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. Again, I'm your host, John Johnson. And when I left off at the break, I was talking about baggage. Now, there's one thing that shows that you have not made a lot of progress when you bring baggage from your old relationships into the new experience. And to a person who's listening to you bring the baggage, that is a red warning flag to them. Baggage can be a kryptonite to a relationship. And kryptonite, if you're fans of people like Superman, then you know that's was something that he could not have in his experience. He couldn't be around kryptonite because it would weaken him. And just, you know, it's a metaphor. But to explain the problem with baggage is it means that when those things are still active in your experience, then the possibility is that it could affect you in the future. More than just the fact that it's in your past, but it's still active. If you have trust issues and you're bringing those trust issues into the new relationship, it's one thing to be cautious. And again, I try to explain this from both sides because I'm not telling you to not have trust, believe me. But it's one thing to then go overboard, and it's like telling the new relationship that they have to jump through an awful lot of hoops in order for you to operate in some normal fashion. That's not reasonable. Understand that we all have trust issues. We all learn at what level, how far we're going to let people go. We all have our own experiences on that. And we've all experienced some level of betrayal. But what's important is how we learn to process that and how we not blame other people for those experiences any more than you would want to be blamed yourself. Because there are a lot of things that other people have no control over, meaning the new person that you're getting involved with. They don't have control over that. And if they're made to account for things that they don't have control over, it can seem really burdensome, and you could sabotage your relationships. And that's another thing to be mindful of. It's trusting yourself means that you have processed things, you have honed your living experience to say, okay, I'm going to take a risk on this part and reasonably expect that I'm going to have a good outcome. And I'm going to live with that, however it is, and then learn from it. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to trusting yourself. And if you could put it into words like that, then it's really helpful because it also helps you understand that you have set boundaries as well. It's not limitless. It has a framework with which you can operate, and then you can continue to introduce new things and to have a good life. Because continuing to have a life that is nothing but risk, there is that philosophy about the risk reward, but just taking unnecessary risks does not make you better. It oftentimes puts you more in danger of having the kinds of things happen that are not healthy for you. And take this from a person who's observing this, and you're the person that's taking all the risk. Somebody watching you is going to wonder if you're a safe bet. And if you're one of these individuals that seems to have trouble relationship building, it might be really helpful if you learn to get some objectivity around the perception that you have of yourself. People that you trust, really trust, who are objective. I don't mean the people that just want to take an opportunity and knock you down, but people who are objective, who you trust, who have some success in life, may be able to give you some insight. And I don't know that I would say that any one person is going to be the end all. I think it's something that if it comes to friends, it's important that you kind of get a really balanced view, or somebody who's really skilled at wording things, because the idea is not to push you into a shell. The idea is to get you to expand and grow. Counselors are good for something like this. Ministers, somebody who has observed a lot of life. And you know what? One of the more fascinating things, and people who have lived a long life, and this is no disrespect to older people, I'm just going to use the word older people. They have lived life, they've seen a lot of things, and they're amazing resources when it comes to just the human experience, what people have seen, how they've processed it. And with your own life, you could use that as a way to read into, to filter, to disseminate the information that's coming at you. And, you borrow what works, and what doesn't work, you leave out. Because there's a lot of things that really repeat themselves in an individual's life. And it doesn't matter what your age is, and when you're reading or listening to someone tell you about their life and how they experienced something and how they processed it, sometimes it's very energizing, because you might come to learn that you're handling a situation the way somebody that you may respect them or have a lot of respect for them, and you find out you're handling the situation the same way that they did, and they had some success. You may not be at the point in that experience where you can measure that success yet. You may still have a few weeks or months or years to go before you can see the benefits of that. But one of the wonderful things is when to be validated that you're on the right path. And that's something that can be done by somebody who's already lived it. And this is part of the trust yourself. Trust yourself to talk to people. People love being asked how they feel. And I have had many opportunities to ask people of older generations what they've experienced. And some of the amazing stories that I hear, it makes me really love the life and the gift of gab that I have. So that's just an illustration of something of learning how to trust yourself. I've learned to trust myself. There you go. One of the things that I've learned to ask myself is, how do I create an opportunity that I can get outside of my own experience? And one of the things that I've done is I have volunteered for various organizations, and it has been a reward that it's the gift that keeps on giving. My gift of my time, my love for doing things, has then been able to manifest in itself experiences in life, conversations, learning ways of doing things that will live with me forever. And I'll give you a quick example of something that happened. I was asked to volunteer my time to do a series of performances at a retirement community. And little did I know, number one, how nice this particular community was. And obviously these individuals had lived a very long life, and were not only had they seen various entertainers in their life's experience, but they were also living in a community that supported having entertainment come in and perform. And again, we were doing stage readings, and those who are actors understand that stage readings are often where you're reading this, you have the script in hand and you're reading the parts. But it's, the actor's experience is to still try to make it as lively as possible, because since we were doing this on a very short notice, there wasn't enough time to literally do a full stage rehearsals where we memorize things. But what I want to get to was the experience afterwards, and the validation from the individuals who were there in attendance, and the comparisons that were made between us, the actors who had come to perform, and some of the experiences that they had had. It was so rewarding to do that. And I walked away from that afternoon and evening feeling like I really made a difference in someone's life. That was an experience in where I trusted myself to go and do something for the benefit of someone else, and for no other reason other than I had the time, I was asked, and it really gave me an opportunity to to represent not only myself as an actor, but myself as a man. And when those things which I value in life were able to be put out there into the universe and be validated as an individual, as a human being, well, I felt like I had arrived. That was a very important moment in life, and it continued to do various other projects of that same nature and a lot of other things. That's just, I try to personalize it to give you an example of something that was important to me, and to know that each time I have gone back and have visited those individuals, they have remembered me. And that was important for me to know that I did something that made a difference in someone's life. So there. I'm going to take another short break here, and I'll be right back, and we'll wrap up this particular episode of Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. We're talking about trusting yourself.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Hello, and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and I've been talking about trusting yourself. Just to sort of recap, I talked about volunteering, knowing your baggage, learning from others, because you can't possibly know everything, and being willing to listen. And one of the things that I haven't really mentioned thus far, but this has always been interesting to me, when you journal about your own life, you obviously you chronicle things, and go back and review that from time to time. What I find amazing is there are things that I've written about my life 10, 12 years ago. And when I go back and read those things, it's interesting to see what I have gone through, what my thought process was at the time, and then to sort of look back in the rearview mirror of time, and to know, was I right about something, or did something change in my life? What trajectory did I take? And the trusting yourself thing also has roots in, and the executive producer here is we call him Tate. He's a wonderful sentence that fits here, and he says, nobody can take care of Tate better than Tate. And I love that, because it's not anything that you can't live, but it's about learning how taking care of yourself, making yourself a priority, is a good thing. It's humbling also when you think of the scope of what it takes to live a life and the responsibilities that come along with it. But you also learn where other people share that love of who they are with you and want to gift you with their love. That's a beautiful thing about the human experience. We don't see it all the time, every day, but there are examples of it that exist. And that's an important thing about the world, and the perception with which you have is learning to trust. You do have to take some risk, and other people have to learn to take risks in order to trust you. So there's sort of a handshake. There's a building of things that can happen there, and when you allow it to happen, it's a wonderful thing. So, going forward, trust yourself. Be good to yourself. Embrace the things that come, and change what you can, and what you can't, learn to let it go. I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I want to thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.